There are a lot of headlines that you read lately about the 4-day work week, working 4 days instead of 5. This sounds like a new work utopia, and we gotta talk about this. If you don't know me yet, my name is Christoph Magnussen. I run this YouTube channel about communication technology and a lot of new work topics and work-related topics in these different areas. Make sure you subscribe because it's quite interesting what we talk about week by week here on YouTube. And I would be interested in your comments. We stumbled upon this new work topic through our podcast, which we launched 4 years ago, called On the Way to New Work. And this idea of a 4-day work week is not really new. It's been around for a while. But the interesting question is, like, where does it come from and where do different working models at all come from? There wasn't a 5-day work week for a long time in the beginning, so it started with a 6-day work week and all these other stuff. So, relating to the new work idea, which comes from the 80s, there was a crisis in the automobile industry, and the guy who came up with the new work term also came up with the idea of changing the work model into a 50-50 model, like taking 50% of the time off, finding out what you really want to do, and working the other 50% instead of letting people off and all that stuff. So this is interesting because this 4-day work week idea is kind of related to this spirit, to the spirit of new work. This 4-day work week is related to the spirit of new work when it comes to work models, which I think is a good thing talking about these things. So let's quickly make sure we talk about the same thing here. If we take a usual work week, then you have the different days and working hours, which are also limited, especially in Germany, by law. And for us, for example, we have a 6 workday model, but you can put your 40 hours that you have onto these 6 days in a way you want. So we don't talk about 4 days working less in total, but we talk about a 4-day work week with the same amount of hours. So using this animation, you can understand what this whole thing is about. And if you read articles that more British companies bringing this model up, or now Dubai came up with a 4.5-day work week, then you know what we think about here. So let's have a look where this model has been tested already, because there are a lot of cases of companies who tested it. Back in 2018 or 19, Microsoft Japan tested it. They claimed they had a 40% increase in productivity. There were companies from New Zealand who tested it. They also claimed they have a reduced stress level and more satisfaction for their employees when it comes to work, and also a 20% productivity increase. So there are a lot of companies who align on the fact that it increases productivity to focus the work on 4 days, then relax for 3 days, and then go back to work. Very interesting thought. We know from the latest news that in Britain you have a lot of companies who come up with this model, but we wanted to make up our own mind. And at Blackboat, as I said earlier, we have this flexible work model, so you can choose for yourself. But we also have the challenge that we work with a lot of clients. So what are the advantages and disadvantages? Big advantage, of course, is you kind of have the feeling of a longer weekend. Feels quite good. Let's say you take a typical celebration day, if it falls on a Friday. This is kind of like an extended weekend where you have this Saturday feeling a bit more. And if you have this synchronized over the whole company, you don't have the pressure that other people are working while you have a day off. Usually a very hard thing. So typically it will be the Friday, which is then off. If you do that on a flexible scale and you say you do it on Monday, you're kind of off schedule. But from an employer side, kind of has a feeling like, would you say people have to spread it out? I don't think it will work. Then the second thing you would have to do is to kind of synchronize the work hours. So right now we have flexible work hours also, like when you want to do it, but with this model you kind of should make sure, would people start between 8 to 10 or 9 to 11 or whatever is a decent working starting time for work, and then going later in the evening if it depends. Then again, you have the topic of vacation. How would you spread out the vacation that people have enough time where they are all at work at the same time, especially during these days in the pandemic where you don't see each other, but you kind of virtually connect. So a lot of challenges in between. But despite all these challenges, most of the companies who did that agree that they have an increase, as I said, in productivity, satisfaction, and again, lower stress level, which is quite interesting to look at. Disadvantages are, as I said, you have less touch points with clients potentially because there are a lot of meetings on a Friday. I mean, tomorrow is tomorrow Friday? Which day is today? Tomorrow's Friday already, my goodness. See, this feels like a Friday. I'm exhausted this week. So tomorrow I have a lot of meetings with clients, which I couldn't do during the weekdays. So this would then kind of fall out of it. Or if you do an exception, you have to make sure that you don't do exceptions all the time. I think what you would need to do if we make a thought experiment, and this is what I usually do and what I would also recommend, is make a thought experiment. How would it feel like for your company? So I would take the schedule that we showed earlier and say, this is our work model. I would communicate it to clients and say, we do this because we want to deliver a higher quality, which doesn't mean that you cannot connect us on a Friday and so on. We just need to make sure which ways. So if you need information, providing our clients better information. If there is an emergency, we of course always have the 2 times call rule. I would also add to this animation a second layer of tasks saying, okay, there are certain must-dos because there is still stuff happening on a Friday till Sunday. So if we have a podcast, if we have a video, you need to make sure during those 4 days this needs to be done. If it's not done, you have to deliver it on a Friday and then take the time whenever off when else. And you have to kind of keep in mind that most of the companies don't do that. You will be much more disciplined after a year in how do you communicate and organize, and you can most likely be certain that your clients are not. I know it with the 2 times call rule, which we use a lot within the company, and some clients are not as disciplined with that, or also share documents. So you will have some effort to synchronize that throughout your environment. But this would be the thought experiment, and I would say it's an interesting thought experiment. I could imagine doing that, but we also must be certain that by default we would have an end point with this test so that everyone can be sure we would go back to normal if we don't extend it. So that you don't get used to it and keep running if there are too many disadvantages, because this is something people get used to stuff after a while. Yeah, this is how I would structure this thought experiment. So I would be interested in your experiences, because what I experienced, work models, if we go to these 3 areas of new work: people and attitude, important area, tools and communication, and work models in organization. Work models in organization are a big leverage to a different working culture. But we should not underestimate that people stick to certain routines and want to keep them. And it's very hard to change again. And this is a big shift. So I would be open for an experiment, but I also want to hear your experiences on that and thoughts. I think pretty likely we will go in a direction to a 4-day work week. Pretty likely. Just my take after researching a little bit, discussing it a little bit, and then seeing where we get from here. But for now, we have the flexible working hours, which we need to organize and sync as well. Short one, food for thought. Make sure you subscribe and watch another video. See you guys next week.